Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NYBB Group webinar series on lower mid-market mergers and acquisitions. My name is Kyle Griffith, managing partner of the NYBB Group. I'm being joined by my co-partners, Anthony Citrolo and Lou Della Prida, along with one of our top M&A advisors, Hal Fuchs. We are a full-service boutique merger and acquisitions and business advisory firm dedicated to serving the lower mid-market. We are based locally here in Melville. However, we have a national footprint through some of our affiliations. This is our 8th webinar in this series. It's our goal in these webinars to educate you on different aspects of selling and buying a business. In our previous webinar, we discussed inside stories on real life exits with business owners who have sold their businesses. In today's webinar, we will be discussing 11 deadly mistakes sellers make when they attempt to sell their business. Since we began in business 17 years ago, we have learned from many of the mistakes that we have seen firsthand from sellers that attempted to sell their business and ultimately failed. We have compiled these lists of mistakes that we plan on sharing with you today. What I want to do first, I want to kick this off, and I want to hand this off rightfully so to my partner, Anthony Citrolo, who started this business back in 2003, and I welcome him to give some insight into the industry, what he has seen in the business from when he since started it to now, and a little bit background, a little bit insight to his background as well, and then we can follow with my other partner Lou Della Prida and Hal Fuchs. So take it away, Anthony.
Thanks, Kyle. I appreciate it. Boy, when you say 17 years ago, I go, boy, I was such a young man back then, I think. Anyway, don't laugh. It's not really funny. Anyway, welcome to everyone on our webinar. We're proud to present these webinars purely for information. I started the company 17 years ago and really dedicated to folks who are small business owners and realizing that they really needed some credible representation. I wanted to have a group with that was credible, credentialed, experienced, have some compassion as well. And I think we've accomplished that. My background is that of a CPA. I was with what was a big 8 accounting firm. There were a big 8 at one time. Now there's only 4. Okay, but there are still a lot of CPA firms. I was doing M&A work with them as well. Our firm, NYBB, now has several areas of focus. One being valuation, one being exit strategies, another working with sellers who want to sell their company, and another buyers who want to buy a company who need professional representation. We do have a national footprint with the Cornerstone International Alliance, which we're the New York component of that, which allows us to really have broad-based coverage with almost every industry and now some international presence as well. So I'm pleased that everyone's here, and I think we'll kick it off, and I'll hand it back to Kyle.
Lou, I'm tagging you now. You're up.
Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lou Della Prida. I'm a certified M&A advisor and a managing partner and principal of the firm. As Anthony mentioned, we help small and mid-sized businesses figure out how much their business is worth, and we also help them buy, merge, or sell their business. My specialty happens to be healthcare and business services, but we're a generalist firm. Prior to joining NYBB, I actually started my career at JP Morgan as an accountant, and along the way, I founded and ran a financial advisory business, an insurance business, and management consulting businesses. And my most previous job before coming onto the sell side was as the chief operating officer of a multi-specialty medical group that I helped grow through a series of acquisitions. I'm also presently the founder and co-chairman of the Long Island chapter of the Alliance of Merger and Acquisitions Advisors. I'm very excited to be here today.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Lou. And Hal?
Yes, hello, everyone. My name is Hal Fuchs. I am a certified merger and acquisition advisor. I've been trained and experienced in getting my clients through that entire process, which we all know can be quite arduous at times. We try to make it efficient and a positive experience. Before that, I was in wealth management, and prior to that, I was a business owner with a business that had sales of about 10 million in sales and in sales revenue and 50 employees. I tried to sell my business and I did fail. So I learned a lot after that. So I think I bring a lot to the table with my experiences. As bad as they were, they actually have proved to help me with my clients. I'm also a volunteer for the Coast Guard Auxiliary, which I'm very proud of. and I'm very proud to be on this board and with this group and to be so professional and successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hal. And no, my name is Kyle Griffith. 10 years in the business. I'm a huge advocate for the industry. I sit on the board for the International Business Brokers Association and heavily involved with that association, among others. Um, like I said, I've been in the company for 10 years, and I focus on logistics, trucking, and specialty trades. And just a pleasure to work with my teammates here, Lou, Anthony, and Hal and some of the other folks that are behind the scenes. So we're just going to kick this off. We're going to jump right into it. I mean, one of the challenges that we have is that a business owner calls us up and, hey, I'm looking to sell my business, and they haven't even figured out what their strategy is, what their plan is, right? Something happens. So, for example, we have the unfortunate pandemic of COVID-19. So there's always a trigger effect that triggers someone to say, hey, let me sell my business, let me do this, let me do that, and there's no plan prior to that, so they're more reacting off of a triggering effect. So I want to ask my colleague Lou to kind of talk a little bit about one of the purposes and for having an exit strategy and failing to have an exit strategy. What can happen if you don't fail to plan.
Right. So thank you, Kyle. So there's a reason, right, that we're starting with this question, right? And that's because it's arguably one of the most important steps in the process, but it's also one of the ones that more often than not, it's ignored, right? But do you know what the number one question that you usually ask, a seller's usually asked by a buyer? It's, why are you selling your business? And interestingly, the answer to that question is a great place to start, because it forces you to try to figure out what it is you want to achieve, how much you want to sell your business for, and for that matter, once you go through that analysis, to determine whether or not that's even enough, right? You also want to figure out whether you want to continue to work, and if so, for what, how long, at what rate will you work for someone else? And the answer to that question may determine actually the list of available buyers that might be interested in your business. It will also force you to figure out what plans you have for your employees, right? Usually every company has a list of key employees that they want to take care of, but most business sellers actually are interested in all of their staff. And then most importantly, it will help you figure out what is your legacy, right? As you go through the process, you might decide that you're not willing to sell to someone who's going to then turn around and sell your business in 3 years, or mismanage it to such an extent that it impacts the reputation that you have in the community, right? But most of all, it will also force you to educate yourself and to prepare yourself. One of the interesting things about M&A is that the process is a lot harder and involved than you think, right? So as you educate yourself, you're going to want to look at the different ways that you can exit your business. And often when I tell somebody that I help them sell their business, they'll come back and they'll say, I'm not looking to sell, I want to bring in a partner. And what I found through the years is that you'd be amazed the different ways that you can actually sell your business, right? You can sell it outright, a 100% sale. You could have what is known as a majority recap, where you effectively sell a majority of your company, but you don't sell it 100% of it. Not as common. You could also have some minority investors where you still retain majority control, but some minority investors do it. There are ESOPs, there are management buyouts, and so on and so forth. And each one of those has a different process that you have to follow. As you prepare yourself, you have to prepare yourself not just organizationally and make sure that you have some of the items from an accounting perspective and legal perspective that you need to actually sell the business, but you also need to prepare yourself mentally. For most of you, your business is like your baby. You nurtured it through the years, you helped it grow, and now the time to have it fly, or clip its wings and have it move on to somebody else, can be a very traumatic experience for someone. That's something that you need to prepare yourself mentally for. And then finally, you might decide once you go through that process that either you can't sell, or that you don't want to sell for different reasons. And one reason, for example, might be that you don't like the value that has come back, or you think you can actually grow the business to the point where it increases the value. A very quick story. I worked for a firm that they did it all right. They sat down, they strategized, they brought in a whole team of advisors, and when they actually figured out what the value of the company was, they were getting a 3 times multiple on the business. And when they were told why they had such a multiple, we'll address those reasons going forward. But they realized that they could fix some of those things and get a higher multiple. And fast forward 3 to 4 years, they actually were able to sell for 10 times when they had initially been offered 3 times.
Mhm. Yeah, it's good points, though. Thank you for sharing. Anthony, Hal, you guys have anything else to add?
Yeah, well, one real quick thing, we are asked oftentimes when we're talking to folks, when should you start that exit planning process? And I say to them, in a perfect world, you should really buy the business with the end in sight. Now, of course, people go, "What do you? That's almost impossible." But think about, from a perspective standpoint, think about what private equity firms do, right? Private equity firms buy the firm, buy the company with the end in sight. They know they're going to exit the company within, let's say, 5 years. They know they want to buy it. They know what they want to buy it at as a value. They know they want to add on some business. They want to grow it to a certain point. They want to get to a certain EBITDA level, a multiple level, and they want to sell it. With an independent family owned business, it really should be somewhat of the same process. And if you don't start on the day you buy it or the day you inherit it, you should start somewhere before, a week before you want to sell it. So that would be the ideal situation. We can help you with that too.
Yeah, I always like to use the real estate analogy. When you're investing in property, what's your plan? Are you going to buy and hold? You're going to fix and flip? What's your goal here with the business? So, good points, Anthony. Appreciate that. Before we go to the next one, Hal, anything you'd like to add to this?
Nope, I think that's covered.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to the next mistake. And, as you go through this, there's a Q&A section. You can actually post your questions, and we'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you at the tail end of the presentation. So there's a Q&A section. You can just post your questions there. So we're going to move on to the next mistake that we see a lot. And this is a big one, failure to seek professional advice. Most of us here are entrepreneurs, right? We're business owners. We have seen a lot. We have done a lot. And, we think we know a lot. But it's very important to make sure you have, valued, trusted advisors by your side that you can actually call on to get advice when it comes to selling your business. I know how this kind of this kind of cut to the core as far as what you have been through with your business. So if you mind enlightening us on your story here, because I know you have something that you can actually share that's personally to this.
Sure, sure. So after you decide why you want to sell, the next obvious question is how are you going to sell? And a lot of the privately held business owners like me decide they're going to sell it on their own. And they feel that way, honestly, because they feel they're capable. They've always made a lot of decisions and negotiations in their businesses, and they feel they can handle this process. Although this is a very unique transaction, and they're surprised at the end, as I was. They also sometimes want to avoid fees. They feel, oh my God, there's going to be fees with advisors, so they decide to try to avoid those fees. Yet I could tell you from experience, when I was handling it myself, I was going to my accountants and my attorneys, not only for reports and for important documents that had to be created, but I was going them more and more for advice. So I was creating fees anyway. And those accountants and attorneys weren't dedicated to a transaction. If you have an advisor by your side, he or she can actually help you through that process, make it efficient, and make it more successful. Many times when business owners are trying to do it themselves, they get emotional about it, right? When you're in that due diligence process, which is arduous, you get impatient, you get frustrated. And like I did, I ended up pulling out during that process because my emotions started to really take over, really. And that's what you really want to avoid. You want this to be very, very transactional, if I could say the word, and try to make it very, very rational without emotions. And by doing it yourself, you start to expose yourself to the very pitfalls that we're going to be discussing here in these future points. So all these pitfalls and mistakes are going to happen to, not all of them, but some of them are going to happen, and it's going to have devastating results, like it was for me.
Yeah, I think whether you're looking to sell or not, you need to have someone on your side that knows your business and knows the M&A space that can give you some ideas and some direction. Because it could be, it may need for you to grow your company, right? Maybe you're going to sell 2-3 years out. You may need to make some tweaks along the way, which we're going to talk about shortly. But
True.
Anthony, do any?
There are
Unless
times, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off, but there are times where we do notify that or suggest to our prospective clients that they should hold back and not sell now. So that's good advice. You're right.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
if can I add just a couple quick points here?
sure.
I talked a little bit at a high level as to the type of advisors that are needed, and anyone going through a transaction pretty much knows that they need to have work with their CPA and work with their attorney. CPA will help them with figure out different accounting and tax matters, both on a business side and personal side, and the attorney obviously will help them figure out many of the issues that are involved on the legal side and help them draft the closing documents. But often, the one advisor that I think is usually excluded is the financial advisor. In fact, I had a situation once where I sat with a physician. Thankfully, this physician actually came with their financial advisor. The financial advisor introduced me to the client. And after I walked them through the process of selling their business, they asked me, well, what do you think I could sell my business for? And when I gave them that answer, they turned to their advisor and they said, I don't think I could retire with that number. And so oftentimes you see people will start to do a transaction. They'll consider the obvious advisors, but they fail to account for the very for the linkage between the business and the personal side of things. In fact, for most small business owners, the two are very closely linked. And so I think they need a financial advisor. And then Hal kind of talked about this a little bit in terms of M&A advisors. The fundamental thing in my view that an M&A advisor will do for you is to create a competitive process, sales process. There's no magic bullet. There's no, you're not going to list your business and all of a sudden the next day you're going to, attract a ton of buyers unless your business has, very favorable characteristics. And even so, if you actually went through a very formal process, you would probably increase the value of that business. But the M&A advisor can also help you educate yourself, will help tell your story, which is very important, right? We're moving into an environment where little by little we're shifting from a seller's market to a buyer's market. And so buyers are looking at other businesses besides yours. And so you have to be very good at telling your story without leaving out some of the risks. So every company has some risks. And you also then need to work with somebody who will move the deal forward.
Hmm. I mean, that would take us to our next mystic here, Lou, and I think both you and Hal can definitely talk a little bit about this, which kind of segues in from our previous topic, and this is a huge one. So, a couple of things we advise clients on: one is the price, and two is your business prepared to sell, and three is the market ready for your business. Usually, all those three don't interchange at the same time. There's always one or two that's out of the equation, but factors that you can control, you want to work on that, and that is actually you working and preparing your business for sale and seeking the right advisor. So, um, Lou and Hal, you want to give some content, some feedback on this particular topic, this particular mistake?
Sure, sure. I guess I'll start it off, Lou.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So this is one of the pitfalls that I fell into because I didn't have an advisor. An advisor would have, and it's exactly what we do as advisors, M&A advisors, is we look at the business from the outside, and we could tell that business owner what potential buyers are going to see, and to see if that business is really prepared or not for sale. And we find a lot of different things that can surface that can be detrimental to the sale. There could be skeletons in the closet, so to speak. There are lawsuits or liens that are outstanding. Maybe they've actually been cleaned up, but you don't have the documents for them. You want to make sure your inventory system is really as clean, as professional, and as impressive as it can be. And that goes for your facility, your website. You want to make sure that your accountant is up to date with everything that's year to date, so that, which is, of course, the most critical and current information, and make sure everything is posted and all adjustments are made so we can be timely with information to prospective clients. Anything else, Lou?
Yeah, so one of the things to take into account in this step is that selling a company is way more complex than it seems, right? So most sellers, for example, are not aware of the extensive amount of effort and time that is required to sell the business. In fact, it could take anywhere from 6 months to 12 months to complete a transaction, and the larger the business, often the longer it could take to sell the business. And interestingly, it could take you just as much time to get ready when you consider that You may need to do a valuation. You need to work with your accountant. You need to work with your attorney. So getting ready to me means a few things, right? One is you want to assemble all of the different documents that go into helping you figure out what the business is worth and helping somebody assess it. You also need to take the very important step of recasting your earnings, and we're going to talk about that a little bit when we deal with the question on valuation. And then, just as importantly, you have to prepare the marketing materials to tell your story. I often use real estate as an analysis. If you've ever gone into an open house and you step into the house, you usually get a one-page flyer that describes the house. Well, we use a similar type of marketing material. It's known as the SIM or the marketing book, and it could be anywhere from 15 to 20 pages or more. And it's a book that tells a prospective buyer, your history, the types of customers that you have, what your finances look like, your operations, legal, and so forth. And that takes a little while to prepare. You also need more time than you think to fix any issues that may arise. So the sooner that you start to prepare, the better, right? And so some of those issues will require you to consult with your advisors to improve the business, to build up your management team, to increase the sales and profitability of your business, and to retain any key employees.
Right. That's very true, Lou.
And Anthony, I know we have had some stories and some sellers that actually, if you have seen this firsthand. You've been doing this a while now. Any stories you can share about setting the right expectation when it comes to price and so on?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because what's somebody willing to, what's the price of your business, right? What's it worth? It's really worth, right, what somebody in the open market's willing to pay for it. Pretty simple, right? And I think if someone is really serious about the process, they got to realize that the buyer is going to be serious as well. And the buyer is going to do a few things, right? So they're going to do a quality of earnings report on your business to find out if the earnings are what they're purported to be, and also if the business is going to go out for lending or not. Oftentimes, there's going to be a third party valuation done or value assessment of the business, and it's interesting because sometimes folks will go and say, "Listen, I think." I have one example where we're working. We worked on a case where um, we looked at the financials and the value came out to be X. And the person said, gee, I've been talking with some people in the industry. I've been talking with some other people. They think it should be, 1 times gross revenue. And that was approximately twice what the actual price would have been. And why are those expectations set poorly? It's probably because you need to go with somebody who understands the marketplace, understands the industry. You get a third party value assessment. We like to go to some of the banks. If it's an SBA loan, we like to go and get an evaluation done by someone who values it for the purposes of lending. So we have those folks who we know, and they are going to give us a real life valuation for that business so we know what it is. Most of our deals happen. The ones that don't, usually it's because the seller has kind of unrealistic expectations. We try to set those ahead of time, but you as the owner, look at your business and say, would I pay X number of dollars for my company? If the answer is not yes, and you're the one who's the buyer, then you're probably setting expectations that don't make sense. So go out to a third party and kind of get that done.
I think it kind of goes back to a second mistake, not consulting your advisors, right? So you ask you for advice on what my business should sell for, and you don't take the advice. That's one of the biggest mistakes. So I like analogies. So you go to your doctor for a checkup, and the doctor says, you know what, you need to cut back on eating so much fatty food and exercise, and then you still eat the fatty food and you don't exercise, and what's going to happen? So we have seen it, and we have the data to back it up. So we help our clients with an internal assessment, and then we recommend, hey, don't trust us, go get a professional third-party valuation done. That valuation can identify different flags and loopholes that you can actually fix before you bring the business to market. So out of all the mistakes, this is one of the biggest ones, because most sellers think of selling their business like selling a house. So my neighbor down the block sold their house for X amount, I could probably get the same thing. In business, all sales are private. Majority of sales are private. You're not talking about it in the public markets and so on. Most of these are private. No one really knows what a business sells for. So you can't assume that a certain business sold for a certain amount. So you want to make sure you go into the market at the right price. Two things can happen when you go to the market with the wrong price. One, you can waste, significant time on the market. So if your plan was to sell the business in the next 6 to 12 months, and you spend 6 months on the market with the wrong price, what's going to happen? You're going to have to reset everything 6 months out, and now you could potentially have to reduce the price significantly. And we can tell countless stories of that where sellers had to reduce their price because it wasn't priced correctly in the first place. So I think Hallie, you want to jump in on that? Or Lou?
Oh yeah. So
Mhm.
one of the things that obviously happens here is that the businesses are put on the market for more than they're actually worth, right? I mean, sellers always think it's worth more than they are, than it is, and buyers think the opposite, right? And in fact, early on, I had, for example, a client in the healthcare space that I went to see him, and they had a practice, and the person actually thought that their business was worth way more than I thought. And the key thing to realize is that when you get either broker opinion of value or evaluation, where no one's going to tell you an actual number. Usually they'll present it to you as a range of values, and you have to decide where along that range you're going to price your company. That's known as the most probable selling price. Well, this particular client priced it well above the range, to the point that I really didn't think it would attract any buyers, right? And so we went and we listed it on all of the major websites, and we did, offline methods as well to market it. And we got no interest in over a year. And what happened was that buyers would look at comparable practices, and they'd look at the asking price compared to the revenue that we quoted, and more importantly, the net cash flow or EBITDA that we reported, and the ratio of the cash flow to the asking price was so out of line relative to every other practice that no one bid on it. In fact, I had other similar practices for sale, and people would call me and say, "I want to look at this one, and good luck with this one." And so that's why it's very important to at least try to to be in the range.
One thing you have to look at to it, I don't want to kind of beat a dead horse here, but you never know what the future holds. So I've consulted with many clients in 2019 in pricing their business and prospectively putting them on the market for sale. And we have to turn down assignments at times to say, Mr. Seller, I understand you want X amount for your business, but we don't think it's going to sell for that particular amount. I can tell you about one in particular was a company in the event space, and their numbers was going through the roof. There was in a pretty significant trajectory as far as revenue. They're going to have a really big year in 2020, but the pricing that he wanted for his business was way out of line than what we thought the business was worth, and that was in 2019. Fast forward to now, we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. His business essentially shut down. So like you kind of think about it too. You don't know what the future holds. It can be most of the times the biggest factor is the illness, right? So most people are retiring because they're burnt out and no longer can do it. You may be in good shape now, but you never know what the future holds, and something can happen. We have a lot of clients have had like medical issues that have impacted them from operating their company. So you want to factor that all into the equation. And like Lou said, the price is a range. And if you think that you have a great business and you can hold out for a premium, so be it. But if you have a short window, you want to price it at a point that you can get it sold in a reasonable period of time. So the next mistake and is pre-qualifying, right? So one thing is knowing what the business is worth. The second aspect, okay, well, if the business is worth 2 million, is there enough cash flow coming in to service the debt if a buyer was to get your deal financed? So we always like to get our deals pre-qualified first, because most likely whoever is buying your business is going to get it financed. So this is an integral part. It's a big mistake by many sellers that put in their business on the market and there's no buyer justification as far as how they can afford to buy the business. So the buyer may want to buy a business for $10 million, but can they get a loan for $10 million? That's the other case. So if you buyer can't get a loan, there's no deal, right? Anthony, you going to talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So you look, I think there's a couple of factors. One, of course, assuming somebody has a quality books and records, okay, we can bring them to a lender, and it's the size deal that the lender would do. If, let's say it's an SBA deal where they lend to $5 million. then they would probably put their stamp of approval on it if everything looks good. And our comments to the seller are, if if there is no outside financing for this deal and it's a small deal that's an SBA type deal, then essentially you as the seller, we probably will have to be the bank, right? Because no one really is in this day and age is going to pay for a business all cash. And people ask us, why won't they pay all cash? And I'll say, well, look, if they're going to buy your business for $5 million and they can go into an SBA situation and put 10 or 15 or 20% down, they can buy your business for $750 to $1 million down. Well, if they had to pay all cash and your business was $5 million, they could take that $5 million and lever that $5 million and buy maybe a $20 million business, right, with other outside financing. So, if you don't qualify for financing, number one, that's an issue. On the larger deals, of course, a lot of the private equity firms are coming in with their own debt component, okay, and that's a separate evaluation that they go through, especially when we go through the quality of earnings. So, we've had a lot of situations where we had one where the SBA did qualify the business for a certain price. It was within the range, and the seller said, "Gee, that sounds pretty good." But one of the things they wanted the seller to hold back about 10% of the paper, 10% of the note, and he or she didn't want to do that. The deal did not happen, and here we are a year later. The business hasn't been sold. It was really affected by the whole COVID virus. So, what's the message really? Sometimes you really have to read the tea leaves. You don't have to read too deeply. And what the financing tells you sometimes gives you both the valuation and the opportunity to get the deal done.
Hmm. Good point. Good points, Anthony. Um, the other mistake we see is fail to pre-screen or locate the best buyers. I mean, the buyers can come from private equity, strategics, or individuals, or someone that's worked in a similar type business. They've helped that business grow, and they come to a point they want to have something they can actually own themselves, and they want to venture out and make a purchase. Lou, I know you have a lot of experience working with buyers and managing a lot of the buyers through your different businesses you have in the market. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Sure, absolutely. So the number one thing that M&A advisors such as myself want to know when they usually sit down with a seller is who is the buyer. In fact, my colleague or my fellow partner, Anthony Citrolo, whenever I'm on a call with him, that is almost always the first question that he leads off with. And I think in the 17 years experience that he has, he's learned that that is a very, very important question, right? Now, why is that, right? You obviously need, as an intermediary, need both a seller and a buyer. And so a buyer is very important to completing the transaction, right? So what the buyer does is they help you figure out in some ways what price you will receive. As Kyle mentioned, there are strategic buyers, financial sponsors, and there are individual buyers, and each one have different capabilities and different needs. And often they might pay you a different price in different terms based on their particular situation. It also helps determine the type of work environment that you're going to face post-transaction. Again, you'd be surprised how many transactions are not simply because the seller is retiring and moving on after a few weeks. In many cases, the seller is actually staying on for a significant amount of time and could even stay on for a number of years. And so by figuring out who the buyer is, you're able to figure out whether or not you're going to work well with this person. And then it also helps establish the post-closing environment. If you're someone who doesn't want to a seller who's going to go out there and make a lot of acquisitions in a short period of time and maybe sell your company very quickly, it behooves you to figure out the different buyer types and which one of those you're going to be most comfortable with. The other thing that you need to take into account is that it's very hard to locate buyers, right? There, in New York State, unlike some other states in the union, there is no multiple listing service. And so if you want to sell your company, you need to figure out, well, how am I going to market this? How am I going to tell my story? And where am I going to place this listing engagement, whatever you want to call it, to attract buyers, right? And what we do, what we figured out is that it requires a combination of online and offline methods, right? Some business brokers, M&A advisors will simply just put your listing up on a website and hope that somebody comes to that. That is a very important part of the process, but then you need to also be more proactive than that in order to attract quality buyers. So you need to do things such as consider what industry association the target seller is in, and even post it on some of our own industry associations, like the International Business Brokers Association of the Alliance of Merger and Acquisitions Advisors. We also do take advantage of some offline methods that are still successful, even though there may be a low success rate. And those are things such as direct mail and telemarketing. We also often work with other brokers, so we have co-brokerage arrangements with other brokers that are a good source of deal flow. And then you also want to work with an advisor that has a pretty sizable database of buyers that through the years have expressed interest in sellers of the type that are for sale. And then the last thing to keep in mind is that it's also very hard to interview and qualify buyers, right? You may not know the questions that you need to ask. You may not have time to ask those questions. If you're a company that has pretty decent cash flow, has been doing well for a number of years, you could attract anywhere from 50 to 60 potential buyers, and you have to screen every single one of them. So a competent M&A advisor will help you with that. They usually ask those buyers to fill out a non-disclosure agreement so that they know that they can't, that they can't share details of your engagement with anybody else. And they'll also pre-screen them by asking them financial questions to ensure that they're actually in a position to be able to acquire your company should they make you an offer.
So all good points, Lou. I could tell you a quick story. I mean, a lot of times we get clients that come to us when they sell their business, and they say, "I already have a buyer," right? We have a saying in our business: having one buyer is like having no buyers, because that buyer has all the leverage. I had a trucking company I sold, and we had one buyer for that trucking company. I told my clients, like, we have to go out and create leverage. We have to create a bidding frenzy. So we went out, we found 3 other buyers for this particular company, and it gave that one buyer that they had before, the urge and the urgency to say, you know what, I'm really serious now. I want to come forward. And that buyer ended up being the buyer for the company. But, hadn't we had the other buyers in play, he would have gotten much less than he would have wanted for that particular company. So all good points. Hal, I want to come to you on this as far as failure to avoid breaches of confidentiality, which is a huge one.
Sure,
Hal, you
sure.
want to give your take on this?
Sure. Well, short and sweet, loose lips sink ships, correct? So very often it's the owner that's selling the business themselves that starts to speak to everyone about what's going on as the process is still rolling along. So unfortunately, they share it with employees that they don't need to, share it with vendors that they don't need to, and somehow their competition may hear what's going on as well. So what the trouble with this is that the employees are going to get rattled and they're going to start looking for other jobs possibly. The vendors are going to start tightening up credit and not offering as much because they're not sure who the new owner is going to be or if there's going to be a new owner at all. So this breach of confidentiality is such a damaging item, especially if the sale doesn't go through. So now if the sale doesn't go through and everyone is still understanding about the owner not wanting to be here, it's going to destroy things. So that's all I want to say at this point. For time's sake, I want to keep it short.
Thanks, Ali. This is definitely a big one. You want to use very strong NDAs that are proven and tested that you can hold buyers by. And for all our deals, we are very we're very strong in that. We want to make sure they sign an NDA. Also want to get a profile on them to see exactly their background and their track record and so on. So
Right.
moving along.
And that's really the value of having that advisor with you, that M&A advisor. They're going to make sure that all gets done and protects the seller's confidentiality. Good point.
So we're playing baseball, right? We get to third base. We're almost there, right? For the home run. We have an accepted offer. We are going through due diligence, and it sounds like, yay, I'm booking my flights, right, to Hawaii. I'm already making plans for the money and plans I want to do in retirement. And we have seen this where sales starts to decline while you're in the process of selling the business, and it does affect things. So, Hal, you want to talk a little bit more about this?
Sure, sure. When I was selling my business, my head was starting to get into my next phase in life. All right. I was not focused on keeping the business going. So it's very dangerous when you're selling a business by yourself. You get distracted by not only your new plans, but you get distracted from the daily running of the business. You're actually very, very inundated with the whole transactional process. So with your eyes off the road there and sales declining, the business is exposed to really, really, big declines and failure if the sale doesn't go through. So it's a really terrible mistake to make.
The one, if I could chime in here for a second, Kyle, another important thing here is not to let it decline even before it's on the market, right? Because remember, a valuation, one of the approaches that you're going to consider when you do a valuation is the historical earnings of the company. And so that's obviously going to factor into play, right? If 3 years ago you made $1 million, and then the year after you only made 900,000, and the year after that 800,000, the trend is clearly this way, right? And when you sell a business, you'd rather be going this way, right? Increasing little by little. So you want to not just you don't want to take your foot off the accelerated period for a few years before you actually do the transaction. By the way, the letting the business decline is something that is common to all industries, and especially so nowadays with COVID, where we're seeing, with a lot of sellers, so much work has gone to just keeping their company afloat during the pandemic and making sure that it's properly staffed, as some employees get sick or injured. And remember, many business owners have owned their business for decades, and so this is not the only shock that they faced. They've done, they've in the last 2 decades, there have probably been 3 or 4 significant crises that they faced, and so it's understandable that they want to take their foot off the accelerator a little bit, but it's very important that they not do so.
Mm-hmm. Good points, Lou. Another big mistake we see is inadequate due diligence documentation. Anthony, you want to chime in on this?
So I think folks have to understand that they are probably selling their largest asset in the world, oftentimes, and the acquirer sometimes is buying his or her making their largest acquisition. So we would, once you have financial statements and you have records and everything, there's going to be a deep dive into whether those numbers represent your company accurately. So we're in the process of going through due diligence on a company now, and the books and records are clean. They got reviewed statements by the CPA. They have 3 years. They have everything they need. And now the diligence part, the clients thought they were done. I said, look, you need to pull, the last year and a half, this year and last year's bank statements. You need all your payroll records. You need, and fortunately, they use a major payroll provider, so they don't have to go and cobble it together. Their bank statements are all online and saved. So, but you got to realize that if the due diligence part doesn't hold up, you may still end up with a deal, but you may end up with a reduced deal. And it's important to realize up front that gathering that information and having it completely documented. We had one transaction we completed late last year where they had automobile and truck leases, and they had a company with a lot of trucks on the road. And Kyle knows because he does a lot of logistics. And there were about 40 different agreements that were either auto or truck leases that we had to get together. And it was painstaking because some of them were on 8.5 by 14-inch thin paper. They were all in different folders and files, and we had to put it in a master file. We had to put it in a data room, and it had to be all readable and also verified. They verified every single number against every single lease. So if you're not really in that position right now, get your business in position. Call us. We can help guide you through what needs to be done. We have folks who can help you with that up front before you get to the point where you're desperate.
Yeah, good points, Anthony.
Another important thing to consider here, right, is that if you look at the M&A process, all of the steps that precede due diligence are aimed at increasing the value of your company, right? Everything from telling the story, marketing it in as many places as possible. It's to get you as the most value that you can realize for your firm, right? Once you've actually been given an offer and accepted an offer and you enter the due diligence period, then it becomes a manner of or a factor of holding on to that value that you were promised. And so the longer that it takes you to answer the questions that a prospective buyer needs, the more complicated things get. There's a common refrain in the industry that I'm sure you've all heard of, right, which is time kills all deals. We've seen that time and again. And so by being organized, you actually can move the process along into close to ensure that you get the transaction completed.
I mean, this last point all ties into the previous one, negotiation and deal structure, and so you almost there, you get to the finish line, but I think having that data room and all the information collected makes everything easier to facilitate the process moving forward. Anthony, have any comments on number 10?
Well, remember, when the negotiation is typically, it's done along the way through the end of the deal, and it may not be done directly, but it's done based on the information you provide and the accuracy of that information. So it gives you the ability to kind of have a position when it comes to negotiating the final deal and how the deal is structured and how you're going to get paid. So I think if you're in a position where you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, the negotiation goes in a much more favorable way for you. The deal structure, the amount of cash you get, the amount of debt you have to hold, basically will be in your best interest. So really, it's in your hands. If you're selling a company, we think about negotiating deal structure up front, just like we think about exit strategy. And you really should do the same thing in terms of your own company.
And it also goes back to having the right people on your team. Having the right attorney that's working with you in that process from the beginning can make the negotiation and deal structure much easier because they already preempt to as far as what you're looking to do and accomplish. The final.
Also,
Go ahead, Lou.
that is also an area where a lot of deals fall apart. You'd be amazed by how, you get a buyer, you get an offer, you accept the offer, you go through due diligence, and then all of a sudden, as the documents, the closing documents, which are known as definitive agreements, start to get drafted, you'd be amazed by how many arguments develop over what's in those documents. Everything from, you don't agree with the price that they're going to pay you to consult, or they're unwilling to, maybe pay the same benefits that you were paying yourself, to you don't like the way that it was structured. Maybe they want an asset sale versus a stock sale. So there are all different ways that it could fall apart. But that step also gives you an opportunity to structure it in such a way that is favorable to you. And we don't have enough time to go into that, but the accountant can help you set it up in ways that are favorable to you from a tax point of view.
Yeah, and then part of the preparation is being able to identify issues that can come up during the closing process, right? So if you already know those issues, you can deal with those issues up front and help avoid those. So this is actually key to getting the deal done. I just want to jump into the Q&A segment, unless any one of my colleagues have something to add in this very last point.
Well, last
What
thing I have
yeah.
to add is, listen, we've had a lot of situations where businesses have contracts with suppliers or with vendors or with customers that may terminate if you transfer the company. So these are failing to disclose this, even though it's not a problem for you as you're running the business, it could be a potential problem when you transfer it. So if there's some full disclosure and some really transparency about that, we can help, and all of your advisors can help you work through those issues. So it's not a deal killer at the end. So I think that and other problems that we won't discuss right now could be problems that our goal really when we present the business, we present, of course, the plus side of it, but if there are some negatives, we want to make sure it's disclosed because you don't want to find out at the end and then you really lever it to death. All of a sudden, you end up taking a hit on the price because of something you didn't disclose.
Yeah. So my banker friends often ask me the following question, right? What is the first C of credit? And the answer that they give is that the first C of credit is character. And it's actually the first C in a lot of other things, right? So you need good character, not just when it comes to credit transactions, but in almost any aspect of life. And it's especially true on the business side. But one thing to keep in mind is that, again, there are very few instances where you're going to sell your company and be able to completely walk away. And so whatever you don't disclose, chances are will be discovered later on, and it really starts off the relationship on a very bad footing.
Mhm, mhm. We got some questions you want to from the audience here. How soon after a business launch should the owner put the process in place for exit? I know we did touch upon this earlier, but how soon after a business is started or bought should the owner start talking about their exit strategy? Anyone want to take that?
Yes, if you actually look at some books on the topic, they actually tell you that you should be thinking about selling your business the minute you start it. And it almost sounds kind of like very drastic advice, but it makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you a very quick story. I sat with a client, a prospective seller one time, and they were in an industry that we don't usually represent that industry. And for primarily because it was a cash-based business, right? And when I sat across from this seller, it became clear that this person had built the business 20 years before with the intent of selling it. And everything about my discussion with him showed that it was a very well run business. It was properly staffed, it was properly capitalized. And he had thought about it to such an extent that not only was I more than happily willing to represent him, as he was talking, all I kept thinking was, how do I buy this guy's business? And so the longer that you can contemplate it, if you could set it up right from the get-go, I think that that's just going to help you whenever down the line you go to sell your business. And then another point that I would make is that sales could also be a path to growth. And so you can sell a piece of your business to grow. And in fact, most of the businesses that we represent in the lower middle market are in what are known as fragmented industries. And those are industries where there are a lot of like small sellers, right? And the big buyers, the big consolidators of those industries are always on the lookout for those types of firms. And so that's a potential way of growing the practice.
Hmm. So, our intent is just to kind of educate you on some of the mistakes we have seen over the years. Hopefully, this was helpful. Any questions you have on the topic, you'll be happy to reach out to us. We've been doing this for some time. We have seen a lot of deals go through. We have seen some that didn't go through, and they haven't gone through because of some of these mistakes that we have collected along the way. Um, I want to throw in a bonus one here. So we talked about mistakes leading up to a sale and up to a sale. There's also some other issues from post merger situations that come up after a business is integrated. Um, you see from time to time where company A buys company B, and then company B, the key employee walks away, or they lose some business, or they lost a contract, or there wasn't a good culture fit, or everything wasn't as it seemed. So you don't want to have buyer's remorse either. If you're a buyer that's looking into this, and as a seller you want to make sure you're selling a company that's competent, and you're not selling a bag of goods, so to speak. Majority of these defects are discovered in due diligence, but sometimes these things are missed. So there's some things you want to do to make sure that you can have a successful sale, because a lot of times you're going to be involved in that process after the sale. The buyer may want you to stay on to help with the transition, and you don't want to have any uncomfortable feelings or any issues along the way that would affect you from getting your payout, so to speak, if there is a payout. We can probably close on that. Any final notes or comments from my colleagues, from Hal or Lou?
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing. One of the most positive things that any business can do is to have a great formal written business plan, even if it's going to be for internal reasons, one that projects what you're going to do in the future, because your future potential has a lot of bearing on the value of your business. So I'd like to say that I'm proud to say that I've done a lot of business plans in my day, and I've seen how effective they can be, even if it's going to be for internal reasons. They will really help if you're going to sell the business, and you could show a buyer what their prospective growth plan is. So that's just one thing I wanted to add.
And I would say that, we often in these webinars tell people the importance of assembling a team. But if you think about it from the point of view of the seller, why don't they go out and build a team? Why might they not want to build a team? One possible reasons for that is they're afraid of the cost of building the team, and they're even afraid of having those conversations with the different members of the M&A team, in part because they feel that if they're not quite ready to sell, that they might just be harassed or hassled, going forward, and you're going to have someone who's going to keep calling you and not leave you alone. But I find, having been on both sides and obviously being on this side, that doesn't really happen. Most people on the M&A team, and again, I head up the Long Island chapter of the Alliance of Merger and Acquisition Advisors, they're very professional. Most accountants, attorneys, M&A advisors will give you a complimentary consultation, anywhere from a half hour to an hour, where they really will explain their fees and the process for you. And I would urge you to avail yourself of that. That's something that we offer. You don't have to do it through us, but you'd learn a lot by having those conversations with the different members of the team that we discussed.
That's a great point, Lou. I see there's one more question, Kyle. Maybe you can get that in. Michael, I believe, was asking a question.
It looks more of a statement than a question. I think what he's saying here: prepared business is stronger, more valuable, and even if it's not being sold. So, good points, Mike. We have seen a couple of deals that actually could have been essentially came as a sale opportunity, but they actually turned into a growth strategy. So, so good feedback, Michael. I appreciate it. So, I just want to thank each one of you guys for turning out on behalf of my team here at the NYBB Group. Just one quick plug here. We have recently launched a new analysis tool that we are offering for free to many of our clients. It's a express SWOT analysis. It provides you with some good benchmarks, KPIs, sees how your company performs in comparison to other companies in the industry, and it also gives you indication of what your business is worth. So, as a thank you for attending the webinar today, that's something we're willing to offer. So, when you reach out to us, and we'd be glad to offer that to you. This webinar is recorded. You can visit our YouTube channel. It's a link on our website. So once it's fully produced and everything, it should be on our website within the next day or so. So you can, if you missed the recording or if you want to take another look at the 11 mistakes, you can catch it there. We're also going to produce a PDF version of the 11 mistakes in totality. And for those of you here that are professionals that that operate as a CFO or some advisory, if you want to contact us, we would love to kind of collaborate with other professionals and COIs, because we are a team. Everything's a team effort here, so we'd love to work with you. So thank you guys. Be safe. And Hal, it's a pleasure doing this webinar with you guys.
And if anybody has any further questions that have not been answered and you want to email us, any one of us, Hal at NYBBinc.com or Kyle or Lou at NYBBinc.com.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.